When I tell people that I run an accounting and business firm, and then I went off and I did an MBA, they assume that I did it for the numbers. But honestly, I didn't. The numbers were the least valuable thing I walked away with. So in this video, I want to tell you what an executive MBA actually taught me, the stuff that nobody really talks about, the lessons that genuinely changed how I run my business and how I advise my clients. And do stick around to the end because I have decided that I'm going to be sharing my personal reflections as well and what I've learned from the MBA. So if you're new here, I'm Humaira. I'm the founder of HM Accounting, which is an accounting and business professional advisor. I recently finished my executive MBA through the Quantic School of Business and Technology, where I graduated in the top 10% of a global cohort. And the three questions that I get asked the most are, was it worth it? Did you actually learn? And did it change the way that you think about business? And the short answer is yes, a lot and completely. But let me show you what I mean, because the real lessons probably aren't the ones that you are expecting. So lesson number one is that everything in business is connected. And here was the first big shift for me. As an accountant, I was trained to look at problems through one lens, and that is there's a number that's off, then you can trace it, you can fix it, it's clean, it's contained. But the MBA broke that habit pretty fast because the truth is that no business decision lives on its own. A pricing decision quietly reshapes your operations. A hiring decision changes your culture. A new piece of technology changes your customer's entire experience. So pull one thread and the whole thing moves. I used to look at business like a set of separate departments. Now I look at it like a system. You have finance, you have people, you have process, technology, strategy, all leaning on one another. So I had a client, right? And they had this money problem or the sales problem, and they kept on making sales, but they could not see the money in it, right? And what we figured out once we unpeeled all the layers and we unpieced and put together is that the problem was within the hiring, and it was on the spending, and it was on the number of staff that were required. And once we attended to this problem, then without my client having to increase sales or do anything else, they were already more profitable. So now when a client comes to me convinced that they have a cash flow problem, the first thing I ask is that actually the problem, or is that just where the problem is showing up? The second lesson is that strategy is not what strategy is about what you say no to. And this is probably the hardest lessons for me, or one of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn is in saying no to things, because I'm always so quick to say yes to everything, right? So it did humble me a little or a lot. I always thought that strategy meant doing more services, more clients, more offerings, more revenue streams, but it is the opposite. Strategy is about choices. It is about deciding what you're not going to do, who you're not going to serve, and which opportunities you're going to let walk past you on purpose. So many businesses struggle not because they are doing too little, but because they are chasing everything, every shiny opportunity, every new direction, and they end up stretched thin and they're known for nothing. The strongest companies are ruthlessly clear. This is who we serve. This is the value that we create. This is what makes us different, and this is where we compete. And that is a completely new focus because it really prioritizes what is important and it builds on that. The more you do that, the better you get. The more tuned you are with your customers, with yourself, with your strategy, with your business, with your employees. And it really changed how I run HM Accounting. I stopped equating growth with expansion. Sometimes the biggest growth comes from clarity, from finally choosing a lane. The third lesson that I learned is leadership matters more than management, right? The program took me through more leadership theories and styles that I can count. But if I had to boil it all down to one sentence, is this, and that is that leadership is about people, and that is full stop. You can have the best strategy in the world, the best systems, the best product on the market. But if the people around you are not aligned, they are not motivated, they don't trust where you're taking them, then that execution falls apart every single time. Great leaders don't just manage tasks. They create a vision that people actually want to be a part of. They build that trust, they communicate clearly, especially when things are uncertain, and they make the people around them better. That landed very hard for me because in the early days, I think I was managing a business where I should have been leading one. There is a difference, and once you feel that difference, you cannot unfeel it. The fourth lesson is that data matters, but judgment matters just as much. Now, you'd think that this is where I'd be most comfortable, right? I am an accountant. I love a clean spreadsheet. And yes, the Executive MBA did sharpen all of that, the analytics, the statistics, financial modeling, proper decision-making frameworks. I ate that part up. But here is what surprised me. Not every decision can be solved in a spreadsheet. Real leaders make calls with incomplete information all the time. We had to do a capstone project, and in this project, we put together our business plan. And part of that required us to do financial projections. But there was a lot of missing information, a lot of things we didn't know. And we had to figure it out, and we had to use our judgment and assumptions in this. It was very hard for me to do that coming from a place of a lot of things that I do and say is backed by data, but I had to do a judgment call on these things. You have to weigh the data against experience, against the read on the market, against gut instinct that is built over years. The numbers do tell you part of the story, but they really tell you the whole thing. And the best decision makers that I encountered weren't the ones with the most data. They were the ones who knew when to trust the data and when to trust their judgment. Learning to hold both the data and trusting your own judgment. That was a genuine shift for somebody like myself. Lesson number 5 is that technology is not optional anymore. And this was a recurring theme through the whole program, innovation and digital transformation. Firstly, I was doing an executive MBA with an American university with a global cohort. The entire executive MBA was online based. We worked in team projects. We had presentations. We had exams, right? And all of this was done online. There was also elements where AI was in it because we had like a chat advisor, which we could ask as we're struggling along or struggling to grasp concepts within the MBA. So it was very technology driven, very innovative. And it was truly, truly, truly a great experience for me. It was a way that I learned that I've never learned before, a very real world way of learning. And it helped me to really apply what I was learning. But technology was definitely at the forefront of this. We also had specializations. One of them was in AI, which was great. I did do that one. So technology is rewriting every industry, whether it is accounting, healthcare, education, retail, manufacturing. There is no corner of business that it's leaving untouched. The businesses that lean into it get sharper insights, they get more efficiency, better customer experiences, and a real competitive edge. And the ones that resist it do get left behind, quietly and then all at once. And this is exactly why I've become so passionate about cloud accounting, about automation, and about AI in my own practice. But here's the part I really believe in. Technology should not replace people. It should free up people to do their best work, to think, to advise, to add the kind of value that a machine cannot. Number 6 is thinking globally opens doors you did not know existed. Now, one of the best parts of studying with Quantic was who I studied with, right? My cohort was made up of executives, of entrepreneurs, of engineers, consultants, healthcare professionals, leaders from completely different countries and industries. And learning alongside them really changed how I see the world, because there was different methods of thinking, different ways of learning. And just observing how other people was a whole lesson in itself. It reminded me that the opportunity that we have is never bound by geography. From right here, you can serve clients across the world, build international partnerships, and tap into talent from anywhere. Now, that global mindset genuinely changed how I think about where HM accounting can go and what's actually possible from where I am sitting. The last lesson, or lesson 7, is lifelong learning is definitely the real edge. And maybe this is the biggest one of all. Finishing the Executive MBA was not a finish line. It was just another step, because the landscape never stops moving. Technology changes, market shifts, customer behavior evolves, regulations get rewritten. What actually worked beautifully 5 years ago may not work now. But the people who keep learning are always the ones who stay ahead, who are agile, who can adapt. Investing in yourself, your skills, your thinking, your perspective is genuinely one of the most highest return investments that you will ever make. And it's one that nobody can take away from you. Now, with that said, I did say that I want to share my personal reflections on this as well, right? And I think it really comes from the lifelong learning. An MBA taught me a lot. It taught me things career-wise. It taught me things from the theory. It taught me so many lessons, right? People lessons as well. But the biggest learnings that came from the MBA were my personal learnings, who I became in this process and how I see myself as a result of this process. It wasn't even graduating with my honors. It really wasn't. When I went into the MBA, I was completely intimidated. I felt like I'm sitting in this global platform. I'm from South Africa. It is a third world country. I may have not had the tools that other people have in first world countries. I may not be as intelligent as them. And I also come from a town within South Africa. I'm not from a city or any of that. And it was just really intimidating to be in a room with people who are at established companies, well-established companies, CEOs, executives, people who are much older than me, in their 50s, in their 40s, and having to interact with these people. I was also not obviously the best spoken or the most confident. So definitely felt very intimidated, but also very grateful for the opportunity to be there and to be learning from these people. And I think that is one of the first lessons that I learned personally, is that see things as an opportunity. Being on Quantic, being able to do my Executive MBA was a whole opportunity on its own. And I was so grateful for that. And within that, and I think with that thinking, I made the most of everything that I could, whether it was attending live streams, attending the meetups and networking with other Quantic alumni or students, whether it was making use of all of the other opportunities that they offered, like mentors and entrepreneurship groups. I utilized everything I could because I was just grateful to be there and to be able to experience this. If you don't know, Quantic is extremely particular with whom they take on within their cohorts. There are only a select number that are taken on. There was somebody who had applied his 7th time already, and only on the 7th time did he get in. So it was something to definitely be grateful for. The second thing was because of the gratitude, I was also grateful for the people that I got to be around and what I could learn from them and their experiences, because they live in completely different countries, different ways of life, and I would never have those experiences or that that thought frame if not for them. So that was one of the things that really stood out, and that you don't get in maybe other executive MBAs, is the global cohort perspective and getting to work with different people. And I made use of those opportunities because there were times that we could work alone and not in groups. But when it was a group activity, I chose to work in group activities for the experience of also being able to learn with others. I think the harder lessons in this was just being very consistent. I learned exactly what it meant to be consistent through my executive MBA, because I'm not naturally intelligent, which means that I had to sit late nights, long nights, every single day of the week. I didn't take a holiday. I didn't take a break. Bear in mind, I am a mom as well. My child was much younger at that time when I started, and I would have to put him to bed, and I would have to come back, and I would have to do this. And there's a lot of sacrifices that go with that, because it's just the continuous consistency of showing up day in and day out and getting better at it and getting used to it and learning and taking it, even on days where I didn't feel great. I went through health issues. There was just a lot going on. I obviously have a full-time business as well. So it really was something that I had to commit to and that I had to show up to every single day. I also, because I wanted to do extra electives, and when we did have very short breaks, because this executive MBA is condensed into 15 months. So it's not a 2-year period, so you don't get full breaks. But when we did get a break, I opted to pause on the break, and I used to do electives. I used to start preparing for the next module and start going through materials. I didn't go through materials once and write an exam. I went through them 3-4 times. I practiced, I learned, I asked questions on things that I didn't know. And so this process really taught me commitment, sticking through something, being responsible, showing up, and just becoming more resilient over time. So as much as the MBA changed me on a business level, and the way that I think in terms of business, it changed me on a personal level. It changed even the way that I value myself. And not to say that I've got an executive MBA now and that means something. It wasn't that. It was really about actually getting through the process of knowing how hard it is and making it through in the way that I did. That was something really special to me, something that I was proud of. As a woman, as a mother, as a wife, we tend to put ourselves last. We tend to neglect ourselves. And mind you, I've done that in many ways, right? Over many different things. But if there's one thing that I will never compromise or sacrifice on, and one thing that's super important to me is knowledge, is growth. And this was a place where I put myself first. I put what I wanted from this first. And I did this process. And it was also just a reflection on being able to do it as a mother, as a business owner, as a wife, as a daughter, to be able to actually still do this, coming from a third world country, coming from a little town in a third world country. That meant something to me. I think was also being adaptable, open to what others are saying, open to learning from other people. Those were all lessons that came with it as well. And what I also learned is that things are not always as they appear, right? There were people who were super well spoken. And like I said, it was very, very intimidating for me. But that does not mean that they are the smartest in the room. In fact, the quieter people tend to be. So just because somebody presents themselves a certain way does not mean that you are less than, does not mean that they are better than you, does not mean that they may have more resources than you or more money than you, then they are better than you. Because with your lesser resources, if you are determined, you will succeed in the manner that you wish to succeed. I would say that it required a lot of sacrifice from me. But again, I am proud of the person that I became in the process, the way that my thinking has adapted, just being able to have a global perspective, and from the personal lessons that I went through, especially pushing through the hard times, overcoming those hard times. There were a lot of hard times where I felt like I couldn't go on anymore. And I kept going on, especially towards the end of the MBA. It was like, oh, when is this going to end now? Because you're tired of pulling these long hours, and you just keep going and you keep going and you keep doing what you were doing. You don't stop until it is over. That level of pushing your threshold really transforms you. So overall, like I said, I have business lessons that I learned, personal lessons that I learned, and I would never discourage somebody from doing an executive MBA, because I think the greatest thing that it grows in yourself is you. I would love your thoughts on what you thought of this video. If you'd like more videos like this where I actually do share personal things, I did have a minute right now where my family is out, so I could just get this out there. I actually graduated earlier this year, so in March sometime. And it's taken me a while to share this because I just couldn't find the right whatever words I wanted to say. But if you would like to hear more personal advice from me, things on being an entrepreneur, on being a mother, and not just finance related, as well as my own life lessons, then please do let me know. I'm always a bit hesitant to share, but if it helps somebody else, then why not? Also, I would love to hear about your MBA and your MBA journeys and what you think of everything, whether you're considering doing an MBA as well. So for me, in short, was the MBA worth it? Completely. Not for the reasons that I expected going into it. It taught me far more than finance and strategy and leadership. It taught me how to think differently, how to ask better questions, how to look at the messy, complicated problem and actually see the opportunity hiding inside it. And it reinforced something that I've believed for a long time, that business isn't really about making money. It is about creating value, solving real problems, building relationships, and making impacts that outlast you. So if you're sitting there weighing up whether you should do an MBA or an executive MBA or any certifications, any kind of learnings, really, here is my honest advice. Never stop investing in yourself. The knowledge, the confidence, the perspectives, the doors that it opens, it can change your career and your business, and most of all, you. So if you've done an MBA or an executive MBA, I genuinely love to hear your biggest takeaway. Drop it in the comments. And if this was useful, please do give it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, take care and don't stop growing.